Hello, I am Ioana and I am the Age UK RBH watercolor teacher. And today I'm going to share with you how I would paint a cupcake. I think that a cupcake would translate really well as a card. If you're ever in need of a lovingly made card for someone's birthday, you can just come along and paint with me. Also, if you just want to relax or find a nice picture to decorate your kitchen. For this, you're going to need some watercolor paper. Mine is 300 milligrams. It doesn't have to be the same, just make sure it's nice and absorbent. Some watercolor paints, they can come in tubes or in palettes, it doesn't matter, any are absolutely fine, whatever's most accessible. Also, you need just one brush, a medium sized would work perfectly, and some nice clean water. We are going to paint in layers. So we're going to let our painting dry from time to time. That's when you'll just pause the video and you'll come right back into it when your paper is dry. All in all, our painting is going to be very easy and accessible, so you don't need too much. Just join in, and I hope you're going to enjoy it.
Let's jump right into it. As I mentioned before, we're going to paint in layers. So for the first layer, we're going to use the brightest color that we have. We're going to use yellow. This is going to help us find the general shape of our cupcake. We need to make sure that our first layer is very translucent. So we're going to add plenty of water on our brush as we're doing so. If you have a scrap piece of paper, you can test how dense the color is. Next, let's draw one big circle. The circle is quite translucent. The circle will be your cupcake top. If you're happy with where your circle is located, you can add two lines at the bottom, like so. This is going to be the cupcake case. Link the two lines together, and there you have it. That's your general shape of your cupcake. If you're happy with your shape, you can add a bit more color to your outline just to reinforce it. Now let's move to the next step. Let's create this icing. Mine is going to have a swirl. You can do this by following along. Don't worry if you fell behind, just pause it for a second, take a look at the screen, and then jump right back into it and paint alongside. We are going to divide our circle in 3 sections. The first 2 sections will become our icing, and the bottom one will be our cake. The top one will have a pointy tip. I am still using very translucent bright yellow, just because I am still not sure if I like this general shape and the general design. So we are still in the drawing stages here. Once we are happy with the overall shape and size, then we can think about moving on to a next color and actually using the colors that we want for our cupcake. If you are happy with it, you can go ahead and reinforce the outlines. If not, just let it dry, take a look, and we'll come back to it and see what we can do with it. If you find that you are unhappy with any details or any lines, don't worry, I'm going to show how I erase those and also why we've been using this very watered down yellow. I'm going to apply some clean water on the areas that I want to erase, like so. And then, using a tissue, I will tap it very gently and let the tissue absorb both the water as well as the pigment, and you will be left with a clean paper, just ready for its next layer of paint. I am now going to erase the first drawing, the first circle that I used as a general kind of shape for my painting, and I'm going to be left with the outline of my actual cupcake. Beautiful! Now we have the general shape and size of our cupcake. This is the end of our drawing, so let's allow the paper to get dry. If you want, why don't take a cuppa and then jump right back into it. Pause it for a second, and when you'll be back, the first layer of paint will be dry. Let's move on to our next stage. First of all, make sure that this layer is dry, and then we can think about our colors. What about purple for our cupcake case? You can go ahead and use whatever color you would like, but I think I'll choose purple for this one. I'm going to paint some vertical lines to suggest the folds of the cupcake holder. If you're not sure whether your first layer is dry, you can test with your pinky. See if it's damp. If it is nice and dry, go ahead and continue with your painting. If not, give it a couple more seconds to dry. Otherwise, unfortunately, the colors are going to bleed into each other. I'm now going to move on to my icing, and I think I would like my icing to be custardy, so I'm going to use still bright yellowish tones, but feel free to use brown if you want them chocolatey, or you can use blue, or sky's your limit. Be as creative as you would like to. I'm going to mix yellow and orange and add it to the bottom of my first 2 rows of icing to suggest depth and a shadow. I will use semicircular brush strokes just to further emphasize the shape of my top layers. Next, for the cake, I think I will use some brown because I would like my muffin to be chocolatey. But again, if you want, you can use some beige, or again, you can use any color that you would like to. You can be as creative as you want. For my brown, I would like to make it quite bright, so I'll mix in some yellow. Beautiful! This is another of our watercolor layers done. We'll allow this to dry. Pause the video for a second, and when you see that your paper is no longer shiny, join right back into it for our next layer. Let's move on to our next layer. Let's fill in our icing if you haven't done so already. I will use diluted yellow in order to give the sensation of light and also softness and shine. If you find that your icing looks a little bit too washed up, you can get a stronger color, maybe some red in my case, and add a little bit of shadow. So maybe focusing on the bottom half of each line and emphasizing that, like so. If you want to send this off as a birthday card, why not add a little candle on top? Let's make the cupcake a bit more festive, shall we? I will use some blue to paint my candle, but you can use whatever color you would like, and I will paint it at the top of my icing, like so. I like to add a drop of wax to my top of the candle just to give it a bit more character. Let's paint the flame. Add a little bit of yellow. And let's paint what would look like a drop, so a drop of water. So the base would be a little bit wider than the top. Pointy top, large bottom. Good. Let's just let this dry now. Check that your cupcake case painting is dry, and if it is dry, let's paint a little bit more. Let's work on the next layer. Adding dots to the top end would suggest the shadow. To suggest the top end of the muffin cases, I'm going to use a dot-like technique of applying my watercolor. Now let's move on to the icing. If you want to decorate your icing with some sprinkles, you can do so, and we can even use a technique called wet on wet. If your paper is still wet, be mindful that the colors are going to bleed into each other. It is going to be quite an interesting effect and is going to work very well as sprinkles, but it may not be what you want to do today. So take a look at what I'm doing, and if you want to copy it, go ahead and do so. If not, you can come back to the top of your icing and decorate it once the paper is completely dry. If you want your sprinkles to be very precise dots, then just allow the layer of color to dry and then paint with the tip of the brush in very delicate tapping motions. As I allow that to dry, I can work on my candle a little bit more, so I can tap into a little bit of orange and then paint another layer to my flame. Add a little bit of orange. The layer of paint I used for my cake is probably dry now, so I can work on that a little bit more and add more color to it. Maybe add some shade or some texture. Last but not least, you can add a little bit of background color. I'm going to add a little bit of blue and then just spread it around so that my cupcake is no longer floating. I just use water to dilute it and spread it evenly around. And just like that, here it is. You've created your cupcake. If you would indeed use this as a card, then make sure you let it dry completely before you write a beautiful handwritten message and send it off. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a pleasure to paint this. Do share if you're painting it. For more information, check the link that's on the screen now. Thank you again. Goodbye.